and welcome to another episode of Paranormal NL, a place where Newfoundlanders and Labradorians can share their paranormal experiences from here and anywhere else in the world. Today, I have with me author and UFO expert Noe Torres. He's living in Edinburg, Texas, and that's located in South Texas. And for folks who don't know where that is, that's quite near Brownsville, Texas, where SpaceX and Elon Musk is. I used to live in South Texas and attended one of Noe's UFO festivals and conferences with Dr. Judd Burton and met and saw author David Childress from Ancient Aliens and George Noory from Coast to Coast speak during the conference. Now, Noe has a new book out, Fire from the Sky. Welcome, Noe.
Hello, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me on today. I love talking about UFOs and the paranormal, so welcome to your listeners from South Texas, where normally we'd be stewing in about 100-degree temperatures at this time, but currently today we are in the 60s Fahrenheit, of course, and very comfortable today.
Yes, that's quite chilly for y'all. You're usually, like you said, in the high 100s Fahrenheit.
I think the aliens may be trying to terraform South Texas or something. I'm not sure, but change the climate.
So I understand your book is way back from an incident that happened around 1966, in the UFO incident?
Yeah, I've been involved in UFO research since the early 2000s, but I've been interested in the topic for much longer than that, since I was a little kid. And one of the major UFO stories that has happened here in my area, in fact, my hometown is Edinburg, where I was born and raised. And I kept hearing about this incident that happened in the 60s. So I had written 30 books about UFO cases all over the United States, the Southwest, and Mexico. But I had never written a book focusing on something that happened here in my own area. So people kept coming up to me at the conferences and the book signings that I hold, and they were all like, why don't you write about this amazing event that happened here in your own backyard, 1966?
Now, Noe, you have a big background about books. Tell us about that. I understand.
Yeah, sure. I started my interest in reading and doing research and books started actually with it was parallel to my interest in unidentified flying objects as a young person growing up in the 1960s. My mom used to tell me this terrifying story about an encounter she had in the 1940s here in this area, and that motivated me to go and look up all the books I could get my hands on about UFOs, and I read extensively. I would haunt the public library here in Mission, Texas, and my school library. And I grew up reading these amazing books in the 60s by people who were just incredible writers, Frank Edwards, and a little bit later, Eric von Däniken. And I was exposed to the UFO literature of that time period, which was incredibly rich and informative.
Eric von Däniken is a very good author, yes.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, that motivated me to learn a lot, as much as I could, about the topic. And that's how my mom's incident spurred me to do the research myself. And eventually I linked up with a co-author who wanted to do a book with me together, and so I had the research skills, being a librarian for over 30 years. I had the research skills and the writing skills, and he had the UFO background, so we did our first book together in 2007, and since then I've written a number of others. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and it's still a topic that greatly appeals to me.
So tell us more about your new book.
Yeah, getting back to this incident that people kept telling me about, that I should write a book about, I finally linked up with a gentleman who was a first-hand eyewitness to the event, because he was there at the scene shortly after it happened. And in 1966, there was a very famous, later he became very well known here in South Texas, a gentleman named Milo Ponce. And Milo Ponce was a deputy sheriff who later became a county commissioner and a big political force here in South Texas. Even today, he passed away 20 or 30 years ago, and he's still remembered. And there's a county park named after him here, close to where I live. But anyway, at this time, 1966, in the fall, Milo was a deputy sheriff for the sheriff's department. When he was in the middle of the night, at around midnight, he was called from his home. He was on call that night. He was called to a strange incident that had happened north of town. Got in his squad car and took off. And the call had been about some men that were in an agitated state. 8 men, construction workers, who were in an agitated state, and they were standing alongside one of our local roads here, and they were trying to flag down traffic, and they were screaming and yelling at the passing motorists. And there was also a big fire that had broken out in the vicinity of where these men were trying to flag down traffic. So when Deputy Ponce got out to the scene, he discovered that these men had had a terrifying UFO encounter where this incredibly large metallic saucer came out of the clouds right over their work site. And one of them, they came running out of their mobile home where they were spending the nights. They came running out of their mobile home, and one of them took a shot at this object with a rifle. Being in a very isolated area and out, in a very kind of wilderness area, they were well equipped with weapons. So when he took the shot, there was an immediate response from the object, and it blasted down beams of fire that totally destroyed their entire encampment. It destroyed their construction equipment, melted down their caterpillars, their pickup trucks, and all the equipment that they had there at the work site, including their RV, their mobile home, was totally destroyed. And these men ran for their lives. Luckily, none of them was injured, according to the report that Deputy Ponce gave later. They all survived unscathed. They ran out to the nearby roadway and were trying to flag down traffic, and that's when he arrived on the scene and witnessed this incredible devastation and this incredible object that had descended out of the clouds. So that's basically the story, and there's a lot more to it. The investigation that's been done over the years. Deputy Ponce's son, Joe Ponce, is the one who came forward with the story. He had promised his dad that he would never disclose this until after his dad passed away. So he hadn't told anybody until all these years later. And it was in 2012, actually, that Joe Ponce, the deputy's son, first told the story publicly. And he actually called me up and asked if I wanted to tell the story to the world. And of course, I told him, yes, I'd like to hear it. So that's how the story came about. And I had, even though he told it to me in 2012, I had never really put it down. I had been busy on other projects. I already had a number of other books in the works about UFOs, but I finally did get around to it. And the book was released in October, just this past month. And I've gotten a lot of very positive feedback from people about it, Jennifer. So
well,
happy to have done it.
This sounds very, very interesting, especially when you talked about the beams with fire. They melted metal, RVs,
Yes.
and cars. I mean, that's some pretty intense heat right there.
We take people out to the scene on little tours. I know the lady that owns a ranch, and she allows us to have tours. In fact, our local MUFON group is going to have a tour of where this incident happened coming up here in a couple weeks. And I'll be taking them down there to the very spot It's what you in South Texas we call a caliche pit, which is basically an indentation in the earth where excavations have occurred to remove this native caliche, which is kind of a gravel-like substance that's used for the construction of roads and driveways and stuff like that. So there's this big indentation in the ground. It looks like a big, huge crater, and that in that indentation or pit is where this incident happened. So I take people down there, I show them around, and the interesting thing, Jennifer, is that you can still see burn marks all over the place, scraps of metal, big pieces of metal, twisted metal, burned up, charred. I've done several television documentaries. We just concluded one about 3 weeks ago with the local Telemundo affiliate, in which I show them, we were there, we take the reporters up to the scene and we show them these scraps of metal. Just, you can find them, they're just strewn all over this pit where this incident happened.
Now,
so having something tangible that you can show people brings it all home, you know what I mean?
Now, I was going to ask you, you had mentioned about MUFON Texas. Did they do an actual MUFON report, or was there an actual MUFON investigation to that site yet?
See, he waited, this happened in 66, and he waited until 2012 to disclose it. So nobody has actually done any sort of, there's been, and in my book, I give the results of several small investigations like EMF. They've discovered high EMF readings in certain parts. There's been a little bit higher than normal radiation levels in certain spots where the twisted remains of the metallic objects that were destroyed that evening are. So there's been a few little, EMF meters used and Geiger counters and so forth to sweep the area, but nobody has done a systematic analysis of the entire area, which I'm hoping we will do. And hopefully this upcoming meeting that we're going to hold here in a couple weeks with the local MUFON group might actually spur that to happen.
Yes, because once you actually do an official report, they can do then an official investigation. Even though it's been so many years, like you said, there's still residual EMF and radiation, and there may be some other anomalies that has not been investigated. Maybe there's something with the magnetics. I don't know if they've tested any compasses in that area.
Well, we had a friend of mine who took a drone to shoot video from up high, and he was having trouble controlling it. He said he kept losing the signal. There was some kind of interference all around the area that caused him to lose the signal on the drone. In fact, at one time, if I recall correctly, it's been a couple of years, he totally lost the signal. The signal totally blanked out on the drone, and the drone came and landed on its own, because it no longer had remote control on it. So there's definitely stuff out there that's not normal, not within the normal range.
No, definitely not. Now, hasn't there been other instances in Texas, such as the Lubbock incident, or the other Roswell?
Yeah, we've had a number of other incidents, but some of the investigators that have come down here to Edinburg have equated it to being similar to the Cash Landrum case in East Texas near Houston, which is where the witnesses were approached by a large craft, and then later they suffered strange radiation type illnesses that eventually claimed their lives. So we don't know, and it's a whole nother part of this story. We don't know what happened to the 8 construction workers that were involved in this, because the sheriff's department was visited by a crew from the military a day or two later, and they requested that all the reports and documentation be turned over to them.
Now, that was going to be my next question. Was there any military involvement?
Right. It was, they arrived at the sheriff's department, which was the lead agency investigating this, and they told the county sheriff that he should forget about this ever happening, and they collected up all of the paperwork and took it back with them, including the paperwork from the fire department, which also responded to the fire that happened out at the incident. So it's very hard to determine whether the 8 construction workers who were from the Dallas, Texas area, and they went back to Dallas the morning after, swearing that they would never return to South Texas ever again. It's hard to determine if they would ever, if they may have later had health consequences from their encounter, because unfortunately we no longer know their identities. So in getting this story out, we are hopeful that perhaps someone in the Dallas area who may have been related to those men might have heard them say something, later in their lives, or might know something. We are hoping that perhaps we can obtain more information from relatives or acquaintances.
Well, hopefully this podcast will help find some of those men and try to get them interviewed. Back to the fire department, did you or anybody interview any of the fire department members?
Well, that's the thing, is we don't have any documentation, so we don't know who responded to that case. We've made inquiries, and so far it's been a dead end because it happened so long ago, and because the records of the incident are missing. And the thing about that, Jennifer, is this story has only been known for a few years, a couple years. It's only now starting to come out, so it's very likely that as we go along, there will be people who will come forward, like Joe Poinson, who came forward in 2012 and first disclosed this. We're hopeful there will be others who will come forward and give us more information. So that is our hope.
It is kind of like a cold case file and catching down the trail and trying to pick up the scent again. Now, in relation to UFOs and other UFO topics, can you speak to other topics that you have or have written about or experienced yourself?
Well, I've written, as I mentioned earlier, a total of 30 books that are UFO related, and most of the cases occurred in the southwestern United States or northwestern Mexico. And one of the interesting cases that I've been on several television shows about was a reported UFO crash near a small Texas town called Presidio. It's a border town. It's located in the what's known as the Big Bend National Park area of Texas. And we went down there, my co-author Ruben Uriarte and we went down there to investigate. We've written actually 2 different books. We wrote a book called Mexico's Roswell, which was covered extensively, and there were a couple of shows done on the History Channel and several other channels. So that case was very interesting because it was about a plane that crashed with a UFO. The plane had departed El Paso International Airport. This was 1974, by the way. And it was headed south toward Mexico City when it apparently collided with a small saucer-shaped object. And both craft went down in the desert. So then there was an effort to recover the crashed UFO by the Mexican military, which was not successful because all the soldiers died. We think it was from exposure to something at the crash site.
All of them died?
Sorry?
All of?
Yeah, all of the Mexican soldiers died. The U.S. Soldiers arrived shortly afterward wearing biohazard gear and were able to recover the saucer and bring it back to the UFOs, according to the story. It's a very interesting story that has a lot of complex angles to it. Our book is called Mexico's Roswell, and then the follow-up book to it is called the Coyame Incident, because the actual crashed saucer crashed near a small community called Coyame, Mexico. So,
for our listeners, Noe, who want to look that up and Google it, how would our listeners spell that? Coyame
is C-O-Y-A-M-E. So C-O-Y-A-M-E.
So it's Coyame, Mexico.
Yeah. And if they go to my website, roswellbooks.com, there's a lot of information about the incident there, as well as links to the books I've written. So it's roswellbooks.com.
Noe, that's some very intriguing information there. Now, was this ever, I know the USA military collected evidence. Was there any MUFON investigation into this incident?
I don't believe there's ever been any formal investigation. Ruben and Uriarte, my co-author, and I have been down there several times, as have other researchers. Jaime Maussan from Mexico and some of his investigators. We went out in the desert and we interviewed people who might have seen or heard something, and all of that's covered in our books. But and some of the UFO groups in Mexico have looked into it further and in more detail, but and like I say, as far as a formal investigation, not that I'm aware of, a structured investigation.
So has there been any recent UAP sighting or UFO or USO sightings around Texas?
Oh yeah, we have hundreds of sightings. We're usually in the top 3 or the top 5 for the number of sightings reported to MUFON in the state of Texas. And particularly here in South Texas, we've been having quite a number of local sightings.
Now,
people have been sending me videos that they record on their phone, and they've been sending me pictures and other evidence. So it's been quite busy in terms of sightings.
Now, for the listeners, with the sightings, were their sightings pre-Elon and pre-SpaceX?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And one of the interesting things also, Jennifer, is that there have been some really strange things photographed flying around the SpaceX launch site.
No, that's an interesting.
Users have sent me videos that they've taken, because a lot of people go down there whenever there's a launch, and they'll sit there. This is the area called Boca Chica, which is right at the mouth of the Rio Grande, where it empties into the Gulf of Mexico in the Brownsville area, about 50 miles from where I am right now. And so people go out there to watch these launches, and while they're waiting, they see these strange objects, saucers, that have appeared in the skies near the launch pad.
Do you have any of these videos that you'd like to share on Paranormal NL?
Yeah, I can definitely send a couple that people have sent me. So
I think our listeners would really like to see those.
Actually, they're stills, but very interesting to look at.
Yeah, I've actually had a few sightings of my own there in Texas pre-SpaceX. This was before SpaceX was built there. And I've talked to a lot of people who live there who've had their own sightings also. Similar to tic-tac objects moving around in the sky and things like that.
So some people say that these beings are monitoring the SpaceX launches. I don't know, but there's been unusual sightings. All I can say, there's been unusual sightings at the launch site. in Brownsville since the launches began, and I'm not really sure what that means, but the images are quite visually impressive.
Makes me think about that show Skinwalker Ranch, where Travis Taylor, he's a physicist and sets off rockets and whatnot, and while they do that, they do have some UAPs appear.
That's correct. So, don't know exactly what's going on, but there have always been reports of strange things in the sky down in that area.
Now, in Texas, what about cryptids? Do you get much research on cryptids or discussions on that?
Well, we were a hotbed of activity in the 70s with so-called big bird sightings. Entire books have been written that happened here in South Texas in the mid-1970s. And we also had cattle mutilations going on around the same time.
Yes.
But lately, not so much activity in that arena. Not here. We've had the so-called chupacabra, supposedly a couple of sightings.
Can you explain to our listeners what the chupacabra is?
It's some kind of strange mutated animal that looks sort of like somewhere between a goat and a dog, or a jackal and a goat, and it's seen out in the wild often. It's been tracked, and people have tried to determine what it is, and so far it's been inconclusive. It's just that nobody can determine exactly what it is.
Lots of strange goings on in South Texas, Noe.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show today. And for our listeners, again, if you want to read more of Noe's books, Noe, you want to give a plug there on where to go again? RoswellBooks.com, is that correct?
That's correct. It's named after, I've done several books about the Roswell UFO case, so my company that I started, publishing company, is called RoswellBooks.com. Yes.
Perfect. And for our Paranormal NL listeners, if you want to appear in one of our podcasts or want to share any of your experiences or any of your books, reach out to us on Paranormal NL on Facebook, on Messenger, and you can have your own podcast. Well, thanks again for coming on the show today, Noe. It's been great having you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and everybody have a great time.
Thank you so much.